Market Watch update. Everybody wants to know exactly what's happening moving into August of 2022 with the housing market, with the recession. Second quarter of negative growth. So one of the big questions is, where does that put us economically? Where does that put the housing market economically? And how does this affect you individually, you as an investor, and all of us as American people? That's the big question. And so I went down and looked into the National Association of Home Builders. I got tired of looking at all the riffraff on CNBC, CBS, Fox News, and listening to all the mainstream media that was out there. So as you guys know, I go to the source itself. I go to the National Association of Realtors and the National Association of Home Builders. And I wanted to see what was on their speculative list of priority, what their concerns are, what their concerns in moving forward in the past have been, and where they are now moving forward. And some of the policymakers, the chairman, Jerry Conter, one of his main objectives right now is looking into housing, the housing affordability crisis, and keeping housing on the forefront of policymakers' eyes and the mainstream media, because they know that if they keep the housing crisis as far as its affordability in front of policymakers and mainstream media, it'll get so much press that it'll put pressure on the feds and on our governmental agencies to be able to push housing issues down. And the biggest issue in the housing market right now is housing affordability. The need for housing is there. It's just that the need for affordable housing is what's most important. And so policymakers, we want to be in their face. We want to be right in front of them, and we want to have their attention so that they address these. Now, some of the main points that the National Association of Home Builders is really focusing on is the lumber tariffs. They're telling policymakers, look, let's focus on getting the tariffs lifted on lumber so we can bring down the cost of lumber substantially. That way we can open up the Canadian borders, we can bring in lumber, and once we have the affordability, once we have the availability of lumber, supply and demand goes down, meaning affordability goes down. And so we're able to utilize the supply. So when supply goes up and demand goes down, and demand doesn't really go down, there's just a huge demand, but when the supply and demand chain together, work together where there's more availability, so more availability of lumber materials, and there's still the demand, but the availability doesn't supersede the demand, then lumber prices come down. We don't want there to not be a demand. We want the demand for lumber. We just want there to be the availability of lumber to bring a balance, a checks and balance, because right now everything's skewed. Everything's really high on lumber prices, and we want that to come down. So that's the number one thing that we want policymakers to be addressing right now, and that's what the National Association of Home Builders is really hyper-focused on. Second thing is housing affordability challenges. They want to figure out how the feds are going to address the housing affordability challenges that the U.S. people are hindered by right now. High interest rates, inflation, increased housing prices. How is this going to be addressed? And so lumber and building material prices, so not just lumber. So the third one is lumber and building material prices, because now building materials have kind of stabilized for a while. In 2001, they kind of hyped up a lot. They went back down, and now they're back up again. And so the National Association of Home Builders said, we need to address all building materials. Now, the solution that they're saying for the housing affordability crisis is they need more entry-level homes. There's just not enough entry-level homes on the market. And so we need more entry-level homes. Now, as most of you guys know, I don't focus on the entry-level home area as far as our sector and business model on buying land and building houses. But what we do focus on is we focus on the affordability of apartments and multifamily. What's happened is all these Class A apartment buildings have went up nationwide. And the biggest problem with just fully amenitied Class A apartments is that they're expensive to rent. Rents have went through the roof. So in spite of the availability of apartments being there, the availability of price-effective apartments is not. And so how do you meet that? How do you go in as a developer, an investor, a builder, and how do you meet those criterias to be able to hit the nail on the head and and create a solution to the housing affordability crisis. So what we've been doing is we've been finding affordable land. We've been going in one instance, we were able to get a tax abatement, do redevelopment projects. We have actually a second one under construction in Phoenix right now that's gonna be a home run. 104 units, not enough to hit the US population margins. So a huge opportunity out there for you developers, redevelopers, and investors to be able to go in and target market affordable housing. We're going in, we're finding affordable land, and we're building apartment buildings with affordable pricing, going up, it's Class A, but we go up against the Class B housing prices to be able to give people better rents because we don't fully amenitize the properties. We don't go in and put large, sophisticated swimming pools, if swimming pools at all. We don't put gyms in them. We don't put large, sophisticated clubhouses and with all the amenities. We just give people a place to live that's new. It's respectful, it's affordable, it's price effective, and they're able to come in and have a roof over their head, a nice roof, that's with all new amenities. The amenity variances inside the units themselves really don't change much, but the amenities on the site themselves, it changes a lot. And so finding a little aspect where you can go out and create live to rent models on housing developments and affordable housing is where the market needs to go and needs to press. So that needs to be a hyper focus for investors right now, for developers and for builders. And if you hit that market, you watch these trends, since now you'll be able to profit from it. The problem is that once people already are aware of it, usually the opportunity goes down. The good news is that we're barely on the forefront and the brinks of this. We've been talking about this for over 2 years now, knowing that housing affordability is an issue in the US. MarketWatch online solutions need to enable builders to construct much needed entry-level homes. That's what the National Association of Home Builders is telling us. And here is the solution. We need to tackle the lumber prices. That's number one, okay? Number two, they need to alter tax breaks for builders and developers. That's what the National Association of Home Builders is doing right now. And this is being led by the chairman, Jerry Conter, at the National Association of Home Builders. And he said, look, if we can tackle the lumber price issue and policymakers can help us with this, it's going to make a huge difference in where builders and developers are motivated to go in and do this. Now, if we can go in and we can alter tax breaks for builders and developers and even home buyers, it's going to make even a more attractive sales point for builders to go in and build affordable housing. And we have to cut regulations. And so what Jerry Conter is saying, he said, we got to cut regulations, all the red tape, it taking so long. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. We're over in Washington State, and we're over in the Seattle area, and it has taken us for a few homes over 1 year to get building permits. Now, if you go in and you pull permits, like even in Arizona right now, or you go into areas in California, there's sometimes that it takes from the time you drop off your permits, it takes 6 months for them to do plan review. We've got to cut these regulations on not just a national level, but on a local level. And we have to be able to put people in places where they can do plan reviews with less regulations, still hitting the safety issues, the quality issues and perspective, but less regulations, where it doesn't take 1 year to pull a single family home out of the ground, where we can go in and pull single family homes out of the ground in 30 days. And that's one thing I love about the Southwest and where we build locally here in the Albuquerque market, is that we can get plan reviews done in less than 30 days and in just a few days have building permits. And so we need more of that happening nationwide to allow builders and developers to come in and take action on affordable housing. Because if you can do it quick, and you can sprint with affordable housing and pull them out of the ground, you're going to succeed. Now, I know a lot of people want to know, Jerome, where is the market right now, and how is the second quarter of negative GDP going to affect us? So in a textbook, okay, in a perfect little world, in a textbook, they say that a recession is called out after a second quarter of negative GDP. And lobbyists are arguing, federal administrators are arguing that we're not. So if you talk to the Biden administration, they're sitting back saying, hold on. I know that in the definition-wise, the second quarter of negative GDP growth, we're automatically in a recession. But they're saying, but labor is still really, really strong in our labor pool. And they're 100% right. It is right now today. But where is labor going to be in just months from now or 1 year from now if we don't get our GDP under control? And that is the big question. And so what people are looking at is they're sitting back going, well, I don't have a problem today. The labor pool is still really good. Lobbyists, lawmakers, pay attention, listen up. If we don't get our GDP in order, your labor pool is going to go down the drain along with everything else, along with inflation, high interest rates, and everything else. We have got to address our GDP and our GDP growth, and we have to start importing and exporting goods and services again. Otherwise, the labor pool, there's not going to be a need for labor because there's not going to be as much need for import, export, which means it affects everything from the housing market to furniture stores to retail to food, groceries, commodities, everything. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have to address the negative GDP. And right now, they're 100% right. If we address GDP, labor pool is going to remain strong, and this recession that they're calling a recessionary market will not be as frightening and in shambles as people think it's going to be. Now, if we don't address our negative GDP in just the next quarter or two, we're going to really be affected. We're really going to start seeing the writing on the wall. We're really going to start seeing layoffs and large companies and corporate sectors repositioning and restructuring their corporations to be able to shed off unneeded labor and cut costs. Right now, they still have a lot of equity on the books. There's still a lot of money on the books, but that money is going to get exhausted on expenses and inflation if we don't get this stuff under control. So what we're urging lawmakers and policymakers to do is sit back and say, look, we have to address this GDP issue. We have to open up trades, open up these tariffs, and let's get lumber in here and let's start doing open trade again. Let's address the GDP so that job growth continues. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, interest rates have come down slightly. Do we want them to come down? I'm not so sure we do. I think in the moment, it kind of helps the market believe that interest rates are going to come back down, but I still think that inflation is more of an issue than interest rates. And I think interest rates should still go up a little bit so we could stabilize this. Let's work on our GDP growth. And then, yes, let's start to soften interest rates once we get our inflation under control. We open up our lumber tariffs and let Canada start shipping lumber back into the United States. And let's get this housing crisis under control so that everybody that wants to go out and buy land, build houses, can really take advantage of the true opportunity that exists in the building and developing sector. And for those of you guys who really want to hit a home run, get into the multifamily development space, and let's get you guys moving profits, residual and passive income, and let's go out and let's start making some long-term moves to a long-term, stronger U.S. economy. God bless, and go out and compound your success.